We contain all. Isness and notness is both contained in the human experience. We can't have one without the other. We contain all beliefs, right? All is accessible to us. It's not like we contain one belief and don't contain the other. If there's a belief that I am undeserving and we contain that, the opposite of that, the yesness of that, is also contained within us. It's also accessible. The coin has two sides, and we are the whole coin. We contain both sides. The yesness and notness is accessible. There's no exclusivity. Like I contain this, and the opposite of that, I don't have. Or I only contain this, and I don't contain the opposite of that. Now, the choice lies in which we assign, you can say, the spotlight on, which one we give recognition to. And that will be the experience that we get, right? If there's the notness belief and we feed it, then it's gonna feed back to us the notness experience. But if we shift the recognition, the spotlight to the opposite, then that's the experience that we get. Now, what is more productive and fruitful is not a doing away of the other thing that is not preferred. It's not you can say, trying to get rid of it or trying to invalidate it or trying to villainize it. What is helpful is actually making use of it, you know? For example, when you paint a picture, the definition of what you're painting is highlighted through the use of shadow, right? The more it pops out, the more that it gets defined, the more that it gets rendered, so to speak. So what the shadow did was help define it. Shadow was used to make it pop out, used to highlight it, to make it, more defined, push it to the foreground. And you can notice that the more far away the part of the painting is, the less shadow there is. The less contrast there is, the more that it's not the focus, the more that it's at the background, right? So shadow is actually used to push something to the foreground, to make it the focus, to make it the highlight or the focal point of the picture, right? So this just goes to show that shadow has its great usage. That's why you can say that notness is a great definer. Notness is actually a great pointer. It's a great pointer to what you prefer. Isn't it that most of us have experiences that are not preferred, but it served as a great awareness point, a great awareness opportunity, awakening opportunity? We learned what we don't want, you know, we learned what we don't prefer. And so it points us to what we do prefer. You can say that it served as a great teacher, you know, that no amount of preferred experiences can teach us, right? And so you can say that's the purpose of notness. It can serve as a pointer with the example of colors. Blue is defined by all the other colors because all the other colors are not blue. Something is defined by what it's not. The definition of something is delineated by all the other things that it's not, right? And so notness can really serve as a tool, to point to our preference. And remembering that we contain both isness and notness, both sides of the coin, the light part and the shadow part, the actual tree, you can say the actual object, and the shadow of it, the shadow of the object, then we can use notness actually to point us to yesness. Or it doesn't have to be notness and yesness per se, but the non-preference and preference. For example, there is the experience or arising of, let's say, dissatisfaction and lack and some kind of wrongness, right? Now, since we contain all, then we also contain the opposite of that. And so when you recognize that there is that, which is not that, meaning not dissatisfied, not separate, not in a place of lack or wrongness, then we have used that experience or arising to get to the preference, which is the notness of separation, lack, and wrongness. So notness is has become a tool to point to the opposite. Another example would be the usual: not worthy, not deserving, not whole, not complete. If notness is used as a tool, meaning there is the recognition that there is that, or there is the construct that is not that, meaning not deserving, not complete, not worthy, then you get to that, the preference. And there is no battling. There's no battling with not deservingness, unworthiness, not wholeness. They were actually used as a contrast to point you to the preference, right? It's like a bouncing off opportunity, a bounce off point, a tool that you can say highlights the preference. And so everything gets used, right? Shadow gets used. You can say they are given a role or a purpose rather than trying to get rid of them, trying to dump them, trying to fix it, trying to vilify it, etc. And you can find that this is very practical. When there is a, let's say, unfavorable situation and there is victimization or wrongness or anxiety that arises, right? If notness is used, then you recognize that, oh, there is a construct or there is that which is not victimized. I contain that which is not victimized, not buying into wrongness or lack or not in anxiety, right? And in this recognition, you can now come from that place. You can now come from that preferred place to respond to the situation. Since there's the recognition that you contain that, you can say there's the refocusing of the spotlight of that aspect or facet that you contain. Again, because we contain both light and dark, isness and notness. But the shifting of spotlight to that allows you to come from that place, allows you to come from a place of empowerment instead of disempowerment. And you're not, you can say, invalidating disempowerment or victimization or trying to fix it, get rid of it, run away from it, invalidate it, etc. You actually use it, use that quality as a pointer, as something to highlight the quality that you prefer, something that's actually directed you, to that which you prefer, to the aspect or facet or construct that you already contain, that you naturally contain, and come from that place. And it can be as simple as, let's say, listening to the news or witnessing what's happening in the world or learning the actual reality of the current state of the world and all its agendas and hidden transactions and lopsided policies and whatnot, right? There can be the arising of disempowerment and injustice and grief and whatnot, sure, but that's not the only thing that you contain. You see, there's the recognition that it's not the only option, it's not the only lens or the only facet that is contained within you. You can use the tool of notness and recognize that there is that which is not disempowered, that there is that in you, of you, or there is that you, there's that version or construct or facet of you that is not disempowered, that is not in grief, that doesn't use the experience or the news or the information as something to feel victimized by, but rather takes it as an opportunity to be self empowered. You know, the two sides always exists. We don't contain just one side. An image that comes to mind is sculpting. When a sculptor creates a sculpture, what he does is sculpt away the pieces of the clay so that it forms into the image that he wants. Right? It's by way of deduction, by way of scraping away the parts that is not it, that, that is not the sculpture that he's wanting to sculpt, right? So he's defining the mold or the sculpture via reduction, via notness, via separation, separating the parts so that the sculpture, the mold gets defined, gets created. And this can be applied, to, you can say, getting in touch with the construct of our preference. So, with the previous example of hearing a news or witnessing what's happening in the world, and there's the arising of a kind of victimization or grief or disempowerment. So, you can say there is the construct or aspect that is that, right? That is disempowered by circumstance, that's victimized by circumstance, that is dependent on circumstance, right? Then there is now the opportunity to use notness to recognize the construct that is not that. You know, it's like being the sculptor and sculpting away what is not part of the sculpture that you're sculpting, that you're creating. And so when you recognize that there is the construct or aspect, or you can say version of you that is not disempowered, not at the mercy, and actually takes circumstances as an opportunity for self empowerment, that doesn't buy into the mask, that is not subscribed to untruths, to untrue nature, to untrue qualities. You see? And so the whole incident was used as an opportunity to quote unquote get in touch with that construct of preference. You actually got to discover or experience self empowerment via the whole thing, via the quote unquote unfavorable circumstance, the initial victimization, the initial reactivity, you can say, and use all that as a springboard to help you define or get to the definition of preference, right? It helped you, quote unquote, sculpt the sculpture that you prefer, you know? Or it's like painting. The shadows helped you define the image that you'd like to paint. It's made clarified, or it's made, more clear or more 3D, more popped out via the usage of shadows. We live in a realm of duality. That's why anything and everything has its positive or negative usage. And so even notness has its positive and negative side, right? The negative side obviously is the false nature qualities, not deserving, not worthy, not whole, not complete, etc. Right? The separating away from true nature. But on the other side of the coin, the positive quality of it is that the use of notness or separation allows you to delineate the definition or define the sculpture of your preference. It helps define it, it helps actually access it, it helps you to know it. It helps you to know it. It helps you to know that you have that you actually contain that is actually accessible and available for you. So again, with the previous example, when victimization arises, When you use notness and recognize that there is that which is not victimized, there's that construct, or there's that you, or there's that in you, of you, or you, or construct that is not that, that doesn't come from a place of victimization, that doesn't buy into, right? That is not disempowered by circumstance. So you see, you've gotten to know that quote unquote that aspect of you, or that possibility or version of you, or POV or position, or however you call it, through notness. Before, you didn't know that, oh, you're capable of that, or you have that in you. But because of the circumstance and the initial reactivity and all that, and the use of notness, it allowed you to access the preferred construct. It actually allowed you to discover that you have this in you as well. You not only contain this, but you actually also contain that. You not only contain the black, but you actually also contain the white. You see, it's a really useful tool. Notice that a lot of people discover or get to a place of empowerment via, let's say, a quote unquote, a horrible situation. It is precisely that horrible situation and everything that is experienced that allowed them to land on the place of empowerment. It allowed them to discover this aspect. It all pointed to that previously hidden construct or capability or version of themselves, you can say. And no amount of Disneyland days or favorable circumstance or good people allowed them to access that. You see, that's why it's always said that suffering or challenges is actually the greatest teacher. you know it's not good days, it's not when things are going fine or things are going your way. The greatest growth and maturation and discovery happens because of great challenges. You can say the darker the shadow, the more it highlights the painting. The darker the shadow, the more it places something at the foreground, right? The more it brings it forward, you can say. That's why you can say that notness is actually a great supporter of isness. It's that which allows you to know it. It's that which allows you to discover it. It's like when everything is white, then you don't know that it's white because everything is white. There would not be the quote unquote knowing of it. There would not even be the awareness of it because everything is it. You see? But when black comes into the picture, then now there's contrast. There's now a kind of bouncing off point that this is not black, right? Now you get to actually know white, the quote unquote the definition of white, because of the existence of the not white, of the black, right? You get to experience it. You actually get to know it because there's the contrast. You actually get to quote unquote discover it and yet know it, because now there is the idea of not it, and that points you to it. you know it helped define it. And so the not it, the not isness, is actually the greatest supporter, the greatest definer, the greatest ally, you can say, of isness, of that, right? Same with the hero and the villain. The villain is actually the greatest supporter of the hero. He's actually the one that defined the hero. The hero wouldn't be a hero without the villain. The concept of it, or the revelation of it, wouldn't even be known, right, without the contrast. And so in that sense, the villain is actually not a villain per se. The villain is actually not a negator, but actually the greatest supporter.